Welcome to Elevate, a Women's Leadership Institute podcast where we showcase stories, celebrate successes, and shift culture. Hello, welcome. We are excited to be back for another episode of Elevate, a Women's Leadership podcast. We are here today with Sarah Starkey. She comes so highly recommended by many folks. She is the Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary for the Larry H. Miller Group. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And thank you to all the people apparently who recommended me.
That's always nice when people speak highly of you, right? Not like, oh, yeah, we know her.
Yes,
yeah.
They're very kind. People around me are very kind.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your responsibilities, and maybe something personal that people might not know.
Okay. Well, I am a native of Spokane, Washington. I'm not a Utah native.
Okay.
I moved here originally for my undergraduate many years ago. Left after obtaining my undergraduate from the University of Utah and moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
I had met my current partner at the time in college, our first semester of college, and afterwards followed him home to Los Angeles. He was originally from there. I went to law school in Los Angeles and practiced out there for about 6 years before deciding to move back to Utah. We really love Utah, and it's neutral territory.
Yes.
And I was looking for a position here in Utah and came across posting for the Larry H. Miller Company, or what was at the time actually Landcar Management was the name of it.
Okay.
And was hired on as a staff attorney to essentially work on a specific project that the attorney at the time had been working through and trying to get things organized. I was hired. It took me about 2 weeks to get that under control. And I was like, great, what do I do next?
Seriously? Did they anticipate you being that efficient?
Probably not. Most people do not anticipate the efficiency. So I fast forward now almost 15 years. I've been with the Larry H. Miller Company.
You stayed the whole time.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So I have been with them for almost 15 years. I became the general counsel of the Larry H. Miller Automotive Group about 5 years in, or probably about 3 years in, and spent 10 years as the general counsel of our automotive group. And in 2020 was promoted to Chief Legal Officer of the Larry H. Miller Company when my predecessor, Robert Tingey, who's amazing, retired. Obviously, I started January 1st, 2020 in this new role. He, in earnest, retired on March 1st, 2020.
Oh.
I took a little trip to Mexico and returned on March 9th of 2020. And March 11th of 2020 is what I like to call the first Wednesday of COVID. So I was relatively new to the role when COVID hit, and I was also the interim chief human resources officer. So that was an interesting way to kind of launch into this new role for me. And we also shortly thereafter saw two of our large liquidity events, selling two of our mainstay assets, first being the Utah Jazz, the majority stake of the Utah Jazz, and then the Larry H. Miller Automotive Group, which I was kind of uniquely positioned to manage those transactions, given my experience as the GC of our automotive platform, where we had been acquiring dealerships for the decade that I oversaw the legal department there. So I had a lot of experience buying and selling car dealerships, and was able to use that experience that I had gained inside of the company to run those two large transactions, which was really great. So now my role as Chief Legal Officer, I oversee our legal department, of course. We have platforms and investments. So in each of our platforms, we have a general counsel. They report to the president. They dotted line report to me. We are a legal team. We're staffed relatively lean. We don't have a ton of attorneys in-house, but we run very efficiently in overseeing the legal risks and the M&A work that happens within the Larry H. Miller Company.
Yeah, because Larry H. Miller encompasses many, many things.
Yes, we have a very diverse portfolio of assets, from senior healthcare to sports and entertainment to financial services, to a variety of different investments, and then a lot of philanthropic work as well.
Yeah. So thank you for explaining all that. I wonder, like, when your predecessor left, did you have him on speed dial? Those are two really big things, right? The automotive part and Utah Jazz and the pandemic, all within that. Was there a moment of like, what have I got myself into? Or just you were ready and you were moving forward? What did that look like in transition there?
It was definitely a difficult transition, but given COVID, so that was the first thing that happened, right? And a lot of what was happening was the challenge of working with local and state and federal government authorities on what we could and couldn't do on any given day.
Sure. And as it changed.
Correct. And it changed daily. And from an automotive perspective, at least, we were in 7 Western states, many different municipalities contained within those states. And we, by and large, were considered an essential business, because people needed to be able to service their vehicles and make sure that they could get to work and things of that nature.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. But on any given day, one municipality might decide that that it's not. Not all things were created equal there.
Wow.
And when I was the GC of the Automotive Group, I also helped a lot with our government relations. Now, luckily, we have the amazing Amanda Covington.
Amanda,
but, in years past, that was a role that I took on and helped to shepherd for the Automotive Group. So had a lot of good contacts and was able to work through that. But it was very disruptive to the employees and to the operations, and a day in and day out, struggle of making sure that we are in compliance with the rules and that we are taking care of our employees. On the sports and entertainment level, we were largely shuttered, and that was an entirely different ball game, if you will, or non-ball game,
no pun intended,
of how to help the employees that were not able to come to the office and operations that were not able to run, and strategize with our amazing executive team on how to make those businesses as successful as possible so that they could continue along even in a shuttered state. And we came up with some really creative, great ways to make that happen. We met every day as an executive team, 4 hours from home. And I didn't have a home office at the time. I just was in my formal dining room, which is not a chair. Eventually, after a couple of weeks, we got everything together. But for a few weeks, I was just in this formal dining room chair that was, intended to be sat in for 20 to 30 minutes at a time, serving dinner, not for, 16, 17-hour days.
Wow.
And so that was challenging in and of itself. And there wasn't really time necessarily to second guess whether I could. I just had to, right? And it wasn't necessarily something that my predecessor had to deal with either.
That's true.
So that not necessarily. However, as we transitioned into the sale of the Utah Jazz, I certainly reached out to him many times to, get his very sage advice on things or historical information, because some of the diligence and things that we're looking at date back to when the Delta Center was built or when the team was acquired, making sure that we have all the information. Luckily, I also have an amazing paralegal, and she has been with the organization. I think we celebrated her 19-year anniversary the other day.
Wow, so lots of
institutional she is a wealth of information and knows where all the documents are to make things pretty accessible for us. And then as we went into the automotive sale, that was, again, something that I had really done for many years, just on a smaller individual scale, if you will, groups of dealerships, one at a time. And this was, just a much larger scale transaction. But both transactions, I will say, since we're talking about Women's Leadership Institute, I had an opportunity as a female lawyer to lead both of those transactions, and worked with a lot of really great, I am surrounded by amazing business people, and within the Larry H. Miller company, but also outside law firms that we utilize to assist us with these types of transactions, which by and large, there are a lot of men that we're working with in these transactions. And occasionally I will be the only woman on a call during a large M&A transaction, although I do always ensure that, at least on our side, there are at least 1 or 2 women participating on the transaction as well in a meaningful way.
You do that on purpose?
With intention, I would say, yes.
With intention.
Yes. And being able to lead those transactions, and that the people on those transactions that I'm working with.
Yeah.
Also view my expertise in the area and my expertise as it relates to the transactions and the businesses that we're either buying or selling, to allow me to take that leadership role in managing the transactions. It was really great. It was really rewarding to lead those transactions and bring them to fruition with amazing groups of people.
So well said. So kind of intersection of both credibility, experience, right, in all of these things. I love that you said deliberately having people in the room, being able to lead that through your expertise. Really well done, really well spoken. And I love how you said during COVID, you're like, there wasn't really time to second guess, right? Sometimes I know as women step into leadership positions, one of the things that's hard for them is decision making, right? Making a decision, being able to not second guess themselves, being their own authority is important. So I love that you mentioned that.
And that's not to say that there weren't days that I'm going to say come home, although oftentimes I was already at home because of COVID. But I would, go upstairs and I would kind of face plant into the bed and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Do I have any idea what I'm doing? And then talk myself into yes. Think back through the calls. I did know what I was doing. I said the right things. This is going in the right direction. We're going to close this transaction on time as intended. And I do know what I'm doing. But there is a part of my brain that's like, do we know what we're doing here?
Well, and that's growth, right? Always being able to be like, yes, I do. It's okay to have some doubts sometimes. Okay, so before Larry H. Miller, let's take a step back just for a minute. You talked about your law degree. You talked about your undergraduate, which is in sociology, with a certificate, I believe, in corrections.
Criminology and corrections.
Criminology and corrections. What led you into that? What led you into sociology?
So one of the first courses that I took when I began my undergraduate was a sociology class. And I found it to be an interesting topic that I wanted to learn more about. And I already knew that I wanted to become an attorney. So I knew that I could choose a degree that was interesting to me for my undergraduate.
Right.
I had initially set out to get a business degree, started with some business classes. It was not as interesting to me, a topic, as now in practice here in my life. Business is interesting to me and is exciting to me. And I love to be part of the Larry H. Miller Company and the business team and the strategy team. But from an undergraduate perspective, the business courses were not something that I was, chomping at the bit to get up at 7:30 in the morning to go to, whereas the sociology classes were. So I focused my time on getting an undergraduate in sociology, which I found to be very rewarding and fun. It was a fun undergraduate. And knowing that I was going to be going to law school and that is a course of studies that is a feeder to law school. And I knew that it was, something that would be helpful for me. I decided to go with something that I found interesting and would be helpful.
Yeah, so good. I feel like that is also, like my friends who've gone to medical school, they've been told, get a well-rounded undergraduate. You don't necessarily have to be in the sciences or anything like that. But I think being well-rounded really speaks to specific careers, right? And expertise in those.
Absolutely.
So you are dedicated to supporting disadvantaged and underserved communities. And there is a whole host of things that you've worked on: past president of the Women Lawyers of Utah, government relations chair for the Road Home, Girl Scouts of Utah, University of Utah College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Why is this so important to you to give back in this way?
It is important to me because it was instilled in me from being young. My mother encouraged us to always be giving back, and she would give back herself. As an example, we used to go to Costco every other week for grocery shopping. And my mother loves a hot dog. And she would
the Costco hot dog.
Costco hot dog. Now, she's a New Yorker, and she really likes a real hot dog. But in Spokane, this was the only hot dog that was available, other than making your own. And they had condiments and all the things. She liked all the condiments that they had. And she would talk about getting a hot dog, and she'd be excited about on the way there. She'd talk about the hot dog while we're shopping. She's talking about the hot dog, and then they were $1. It was $1 hot dog.
Sure.
And she would get her hot dog, and we would get into the car and we would drive. And there was always a man at the end of the parking lot with a sign. And she always gave him her hot dog and a $20 bill on the way out of, she had a $20 bill, and then she'd give him the hot dog, the highly coveted hot dog. So finally one day I was like, Ma, why don't you get another hot dog so that you have a hot dog for him and then you have a hot dog for you? Because we all know what's going to happen. I've never seen you eat this hot dog that you talk about so much. I don't even know if she eats hot dogs. So we get 2 hot dogs. And we drive out of the parking lot, and that day that man got 2 hot dogs and a $20 bill. Oh. I have yet to see her eat a hot dog. But giving back was important. During the summer, as a young teenager, I wasn't to work. My focus was to be in school, and have fun and be a kid. But during the summers, it was important that I volunteered. So she would find places where we could volunteer, either with her or as we got older, on our own. And during the summers, I would volunteer I want to couch it as a camp counselor for the YWCA program, where we would, oversee children during the day and take care of them. But it was a volunteer position. So it was just always embedded that you should be doing something to give back, because you can and you should, and it's important. So it's always been important to me to give back, because that's just something that was instilled early on by my mom.
Yeah, what a delightful story about your mother, right? And I love that she didn't frame it like, we're going to get a hot dog to give to the man that we know is standing out there.
Nope, it was her hot dog.
It was her hot dog.
And then when I moved here to Utah for my undergrad, the first thing I don't want to say the first thing, but shortly after I'd been here, I started seeking out where can I go volunteer? Yeah. Because it was just something that I should be incorporating into my schedule of activities. And I found the road home back then. Yeah. And I found a tutoring program that I could volunteer at, which is right in my wheelhouse. I'm not great at playing, but I am great at tutoring. That's my shtick. I can do homework. So I did that during my undergraduate. And when I moved to Los Angeles, same thing. I looked for an opportunity to volunteer, and started working at the women's shelter in downtown Los Angeles. And one thing that, they talk about love language. I don't know which this is, but my love language is feeding you. If I'm feeding you, I'm showing you love. If I'm feeding you soup, I really love you, because I spend a lot of time cooking soup and developing broths.
So homemade soup.
Very homemade soup with the bones. I'll host dinner parties from time to time. And when we first moved back here to Utah, Stephen, my partner, he says, your friends are showing up and leaving something tinfoil on the doorstep. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's turkey carcasses. And he was like, okay. And then a few hours, he comes up, and I'm on a step stool because I'm not tall enough to reach my large pot that I have on the stove. And he's like, can we I just want to clarify, are you a witch? What are you doing? And I was like, I'm boiling bones. And he was like, I begs the question, are you a witch? And so as the years have progressed, I have a turkey soup party usually once a year. And I was hosting a dinner party, and he was like, what are you serving? And I said, I'm making such and such soup. And he was like, we can feed people real food when they come to the house. And I was like, no, it is real food, and it's food that I've really cultivated and spent 20 hours working on. Anyhow, I digress. So I started working at the shelter and put together a program where we would cook dinner and then feed the women at the shelter, sort of table service, if you will. So it was a little less cafeteria style. Yeah. And then
touch.
Exactly. When I moved back to Utah and started working again with the Road Home, and then got connected with the Women Lawyers of Utah and became the community outreach chair for them. I married the two together and developed Lady Lawyer Cooking Night, where we would go to someone's house to cook.
A lawyer?
A lawyer.
Okay.
A woman lawyer's house to cook. And I would put together a meal plan, usually some modification of one of my grandmother's recipes that we could make en masse. Oftentimes we actually do her chicken enchilada recipe, but turn it into almost a chicken enchilada lasagna. Okay. And then the next day and then we sit down and have dinner together. So it's a fun, kind of women's networking event. And then we go to the Road Home and reheat or cook, depending on what we're making. And then we're able to serve the food at the road home, at the same group of women who cooked it. So it's a 2-night event, and it was really fun. And we did it for years. I think that the Women Lawyers of Utah still do it. If not, I should resurrect that. But I like to marry together if I'm on a board or anything like that. I'm typically looking for ways to be efficient in the service and marry things together. Same thing with the Girl Scout troop, which is the genesis was being on the board of the Girl Scouts, being on the board of the Road Home, and being on the board of Women Lawyers of Utah. And the Girl Scout troop is staffed by Women Lawyers of Utah. It's held at the family shelter of the Road Home. And we get the supplies and the curriculum from the Girl Scouts. And it started at the family shelter many, many years ago when it was in what was formerly an asparagus warehouse. And there was no official space for us. And we would sort of be huddled in the back. And it was just the theory of it was an hour for the girls to be able to just feel like every other girl in their class, and they might be able to go to school the next day and talk about their Girl Scout troop and talk about and relate to children that they're in school with in a different way. And they can say, I'm just like you, and then also be able to interact with women who are positive and powerful, if you will, female lawyers, and see what they could be. So it's still actually ongoing. I don't lead it anymore, but it's still a great experience. And now they've even parlayed it where they're able to take a couple of the girls to Girl Scout camp during the summer, which is amazing. And from time to time do offsites. We did the Little Mermaid at Hale Center Theater, which was amazing. And just like I said, an hour to just go and be a Girl Scout and have fun.
Sarah, what heart, what humanity you just shared, right? Like, I love the idea of your friends dropping off the carcasses and you taking time to do that, marrying your love of different things and creating a legacy, right? What legacies? So thank you for doing that in our community, and especially for, I'm a firm believer that if you can see it, you can become it. Like, that is so powerful. So thank you for your service in the community in that way. It's very touching.
Thank you.
It's interesting that you said that the thing that you can do is study, because in my notes, as I was asking, play came up a lot with your name. And you just said that you don't like to play, but what is that association? You like to have fun.
Yes.
I can tell. Yes.
When I say I don't like to play, if I am interacting with children, playing with children, and this is how I was as a child, I'm more of an organizer. So as an example, I had an American Girl doll, a Samantha doll. And it was very special. And, each piece I would get to order one for, I would tell my mom from the catalog and I could have one thing because it was expensive.
Very cool,
right?
Yes.
I still have this Samantha doll. And what I would do if I was playing with her, really what I was doing is just getting her redressed in a different outfit and resetting her in the cupboard and resituating her. And so what I was given her by my mother and all of the accessories. And my stepdaughter and I play dolls a lot when she was little. And she has a whole host of American Girl dolls. And she plays like normal, right? She plays with the dolls. She's brushing their hair and she's doing things with them. But she knows that if she was playing with the Samantha doll, we're just going to change her clothes and reset up her, whatever she was doing over here. So I'm a good organizer. If we're playing Legos, I'm just recolor coordinating everything while the kids are building. But no, I'm more of an organizer.
I love it.
Yeah, but I do love to have fun. I think that it's very important to laugh and play and have a good time. I am surrounded by amazing groups of girlfriends, of women from various places in my life.
That sounds like that's something you cultivate for sure.
It's something that's really important to me. I have a group of girlfriends from Spokane, who I call them my high school girlfriends, although by and large I met them in third grade.
Wow.
And there are 11 of us that are still very close. We travel together. We do a lot of things together. There's kind of I plan things. We do them. There's an ongoing joke that back when we were in high school, we sort of operated as a board. I would call meetings so that we could talk about what was coming up for the week. Did we need certain outfits for certain events, these types of things. And if we're having a trip, right, I'll coordinate the dates and then set everything up. And but they're wonderful women, and it's amazing to have friends that you've had for your entire life.
Yeah, there's something very grounding about people who've known you way back when.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I have an amazing group of girlfriends that's sort of ever expanding here in Salt Lake. Some from the day that I moved here, actually before I moved here. One of my best friends was actually my boss at a job that I had in Spokane. And they promoted me to move here, which was one of the reasons I came here for my undergraduate. So she was my first friend here. She's still my very, very close friend. And then I have a group of women here that is just amazing, just full of strong, independent women that uplift each other. There's no competition. We're just here for one another and here for a good time. We're here to have a lot of fun, relax, laugh.
Yeah, very
not
refreshing.
Take ourselves too seriously.
Right? No,
yes.
Can't be doing that. Let's pivot into your love of service, your love of leadership, your ability to gather, you're helping foster women in leadership. So the Larry H. Miller Company was one of the first who signed on to the Elevate Her Challenge, right? For companies to get more women on their boards, gender pay gap, mentorship, all those kind of things. Tell me what that was like instituting that in the Larry H. Miller.
Yes. So that was about 10 years ago. Yes. Yeah. And at that point in time, we were the structure of our organization was such that not totally dissimilar to how we are now, but we had various presidents of different companies, sports and entertainment, automotive, finance, etc.
Okay.
And it was a point in time in Utah where Utah had been receiving some negative publicity, both nationally and internationally, about where it falls in its treatment of women. So it was a topic of conversation in Utah. And Pat Jones is obviously wildly respected and had launched the Women's Leadership Institute. Yeah. So I went to the first lunch and heard what she had to say. Okay. And what I heard was that if we take the pledge, the company would get seats at this training that was going to be provided. And we wanted in on that for sure. I knew that we wanted in on that. And my vision for it was that we would have one woman from each of the various companies represented.
Right. Okay.
And in order to do that, we needed each of the companies to be separately represented as taking the Elevate Her Challenge.
Yep.
And I went to our current CEO, Steve Starks, who at the time, honestly, I'm not exactly sure what his title was at the time. He became the president of Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment and the Utah Jazz and did a phenomenal job. Yeah. I think at the time, though, he may have been over Total Care Auto powered by Landcar or possibly Fans. But in any event, he was in a leadership position, and I knew that he was an advocate, and he was a sponsor, and he was somebody that was a proponent of helping to push women forward in the organization and in Utah. And I told him my idea, and he told me he thought that it was a great idea. And that's all I needed to run with it, because I was going to be like, well, Steve Starks has my back on this. I'm going to go talk to all of the other ones and tell them that Steve's in, and kind of peer pressure everyone else.
Yeah, so nice leverage.
I went around the organization and asked them if they would be willing to come to this lunch, because that was the other thing, they needed to show up.
Yes.
And the response, a lot of them was like, well, you go and, write our name down. And I was like, no, I need one person from each of the companies there to stand up and get the medallion. And then we have this opportunity for each woman. It took a little bit of doing, but ultimately they all came to this lunch, which was a lot. They were very busy.
Good for you, yes.
And I think as it was happening, they were still like, why did we all have to come? But they were like, well, Sarah said we all had to come, and here we are. So they all came, and they all stood up, and they got a ribbon with the gold medal. I still have mine actually hanging in my office.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
I have a cachet of memorabilia of things that are important to me in my office. Some people walk in and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I spend a lot of time in this office. I have a beautiful office. And I'm surrounded by things that make me happy and remind me of where we've been as an organization, where I've been within the organization, where we've come. And I think it's sometimes fun when people come in and if I'm on a call, they'll kind of look around
Yeah.
and be able to see there's a picture of Gail Miller, her husband, Kim Wilson, Justice Sotomayor, and myself at an event. And then also same picture, but with a litany of different women lawyers who are my girlfriends and Justice Sotomayor. Like, that is a fun picture.
Cool.
People ask questions,
Yep.
right? In any event. So we now have all the medals. And we were then able to, because we stood and we took the Elevate Her Challenge, line item as 10 different entities. And because of that, we were given the opportunity to send 10 women.
Yes.
And it may have been, I may be misstating it, maybe 6 or something like that,
Sure.
but one from each entity to attend the Women Leadership Institute course.
Yes.
Which I thought was really important, that we have not just one woman or 2 women, but if we could get a lot of women in these first cohorts, that we would then really be elevating our organization and getting the information pushed downstream. And we did. And we actually still do. Based on that premise, we are still able to nominate not just one person, but multiple people, because we started with multiple entities.
Yeah, that was so brilliant that you knew.
Don't tell Pat if that was a loophole.
I'm sure she loved it, even if it was. That intuitively you knew that, no, I just can't go and give you a memo about what they said. Like, you all need to show up so that we can kind of disseminate through the whole company.
Yeah. And that's true of the entirety of the conversation of helping to support and promote women in leadership and in business. This is not a zero-sum game of men versus women.
No.
It requires male sponsorship. It requires the male executives to be bought into the concept, and to show up and to sponsor women, and to help other men come along in that process as well and become sponsors. And that was very helpful to have our entire leadership team, who at the time was all male, show up to say, we're here to move the position of women in our organization in Utah forward. And we're showing up with our time and our presence to
which matters,
her, which was the tagline.
Yeah. Well, and just like you said, of leading those acquisitions, or like the Utah Jazz, you were able to lead those just in the way that you led the company to this, right? Because you're the one that made that happen. So thank you for doing that. And for all the amazing women who've come through our programs from Larry H. Miller. It's been really fascinating to watch them, right? Progress in their careers, move up the pipeline if they so choose and have the support to do that. Like, I really appreciate that from Larry H. Miller as a company.
Yes. And again, it kind of harkens back to our CEO, Steve Starks, who's always been an amazing sponsor and helping some of the other folks along, and showing them that this is how we stand to sponsor the women in leadership in our organization and make them feel supported and seen. And even with those transactions, in order for the business folks to trust and know that I was going to be able to lead those transactions, required other business folks to trust in me to then say, okay, this is our chief legal officer. She'll be taking this over. She'll be, helping us through this, et cetera, et cetera. And it requires the entirety of the team to do that. Yeah. And we have a really great supportive team.
Yeah. So often our career development series goes to Larry H. Miller, is one of our hosts. Yes. And Gail often speaks, and she is just the women especially adore her because she's so honest and real in what she says, and the fact that she went from a housewife, she loved being a housewife, from raising her kids, to sitting on the board and just saying, can I just sit in and listen? Like, right? Larry used to talk to me at night about things, and now he's gone. And what does it look like? So just her honesty has always really resonated with our members of the cohort. So
yes, Gail's amazing.
She is amazing. Okay, so you did tell me about a story of a mother's lounge. Do you remember that story and the closet? Can we share that story?
Sure. So many, many years ago.
Yes.
when the Federal Lactation Act was passed.
Okay.
So it wasn't always a law that there had to be a specific place where women could lactate and express breast milk. And when that first came to be, I was the general counsel of the Automotive Group, and I had the task of making sure that we were compliant in all of these facilities. This was a federal act. And so I wrote a memo, and we were having a conference, and I was to get up and present this.
Yeah.
So I did. And at the time, I think we had one general manager who was a woman. So, I was up there talking about expressing breast milk and what the rooms needed to be, et cetera, et cetera. So all the guys said, okay. And then I would get calls. Okay, we're setting up our mother's room. Is this room okay? And it's very clearly not a bathroom. So no, not a bathroom. But it would be, is this storage closet okay? And I would say, okay, I want you to just go in there and sit in there for 10 to 15 minutes and plug your phone in, see if it's easy to charge, right? So is there somewhere to charge?
Sure.
Is it comfortable to sit in? No, it's really hot in there. Okay, well, that's probably not going to be the right room for this. And eventually everyone, got a room and built out a room that was suitable. But it was, through the process of, okay, well, here's how we're going to do this. You go try sitting in the room for a little bit.
What a great approach.
See if you're comfortable in there.
Mm-hmm.
Plug your phone in. How's the outlet? Is it charging fast? Because is
there
going
any
to run
light
a pump,
in there?
Right? Is there light? Yeah. Is there anything to do? Is it noisy?
Yeah.
Right? Do you feel like people can hear you? Does the door lock? But eventually, and now we have at our office building, I would say just a beautiful mother's room, which is really nice.
Yes. I love that story because I love the way you approached it, right? It wasn't like what are you thinking, right? Because we never want to shame or blame anyone because we're all learning. But it's just like try it on. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Let's see how this works.
Yes. And so I try to be very approachable, right? Yeah. As an attorney, particularly one that works in a business, if people aren't coming to you with potential problems, the problems aren't not happening. You just don't know about them. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes people view attorneys as unapproachable. They're not somebody you want to go talk to.
Someone that you're going to get in trouble with.
Correct. If you bring them something, you're going to be in trouble. So I've always tried to come with the approach of being very approachable. And if you bring me a problem, I'm here to solve your problem, not to make it worse, not to make it your problem, but to work collaboratively with you to find a solution to the problem and help you from a training perspective know what is a potential problem before it's a problem so that we can work together to avoid any issues and mitigate risk for the organization and make sure that our customers and our employees are having the best experience that they can in our facilities.
I love that. So as we wrap up, I am wondering, I often ask question where they think Utah is currently, some really great things about the state, and then some things in regards to women's leadership, diversity in businesses, where you hope we would be in 5 to 10 years, right? As someone who isn't a native from here, who's lived in different states, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So I've been here now 15 years in business. When I was here in college, I lived on campus, and I have no idea what was happening.
Right. Nor should you have.
But I will say that I personally think that Utah has made great strides over the past 15 years. When I go to meetings, when I orchestrate meetings, when I hire counsel or accountants, there are women in the room. And they're making meaningful contributions. And I see the men in business really proactively working to make sure that women that belong on their teams, are participating on their teams, aren't just there, but are given the opportunity to meaningfully contribute and to elevate in their businesses. And historically, the spaces that I've operated in here in Utah have been what you would consider to be predominantly male spaces.
Yeah, automotive,
sports and entertainment, finance,
even
real
legal
estate. Even legal. And I really do see a lot more women in leadership positions. And a lot more women in middle management positions. And a lot of dialogue and discussion on the topic that I think is positive and collaborative. It does not feel combative. And I think that we are on a really great trajectory. I know in our organization, we talk about, nationally, globally, you talk about having certain numbers of women that once you reach a certain quorum, if you will,
things, it's like 30%.
It's 30%, right? So we have more than 30% women on our board. Let me do the math. I might not be doing it right. We have 4 women on our board. Let me just say that. We have 3 women in our C-suite.
Yes.
And
which it wasn't that way a decade ago.
Which was not that way a decade ago. We have a lot of women in leadership, and we have a lot of women in leadership positions that are coming up through the organization. And as more women are part of our leadership team, you can see it proliferate. And I think that we are really have done a lot of work to get to a place where now it feels more natural. It's not.
What a great way
not
to
to say that we're not being deliberate, but because of a lot of deliberate work and foundation that's been laid, it to me feels like it's happening now more just naturally and organically.
Itself.
It's not a conversation of did we consider enough female candidates? Did we this? It just is, which I think is a great place.
Yes, I love that. That is what we hope, right? With all companies that would be self-perpetuating just because it is the way it is. I like the way you said that. So for our last question, I know Larry H. Miller, like you talked about your board and the women on the board, and that when you raise a woman up, you raise a community up. Do you have any anecdotal or statistical evidence about that actuality of when a woman is raised up, either in business or in the community, that she does impact the community? I mean, you just told us about your stories, right, with the Girl Scouts and gathering the women lawyers together. I feel like that speaks to that. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
Absolutely. When women are elevated, the community is elevated. Women make up, I believe, slightly more than 50% of the population. And we are decision makers in households. We are raising children alongside of our husbands and partners. We are making, by and large, almost all of the purchasing decisions for a household. And if not making them, having huge impact on the decision making. Where children and how children are being educated. We are a large portion of the workforce. We make healthcare decisions. So where women are elevated, the entire community flourishes.
Great way to say that. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed our time. I've enjoyed hearing about your stories, your heart, your expertise, and Larry H. Miller Company, and what a great job they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.